Hi everyone, and welcome back to Project No Buy. Today's video is about how I've wanted to be a minimalist for a long time, and perhaps it's just not in the cards for me. So this video, I guess, is about me making peace with the fact that I might never be a minimalist, or what people call minimalists online in popular media. And I know this has already kind of been a can of worms that's been open for a long time, and people have, I think, kind of ultimately settled on minimalism can look different for different people. It's just about having what you need and not a whole lot more, etc. But there's still a personal element here that I feel like I've been chasing for a long time and have maybe been pursuing in a way that makes it so that I can't just be happy in the current status quo of my life and my stuff. And there always has to be the pursuit of something, whether that's more or whether that's less, whether that's acquiring the right things or decluttering the right things, whether it's making pivots to having less but better or a more curated collection of stuff, or just detaching from stuff completely. And all of these things might be an aspect of minimalism, and all of these things might be an aspect of a healthy relationship with stuff, right? It doesn't have to even be one or the other. You know, you can take bits and pieces, it doesn't have to be a full package. But there's just a personal element that I think for me will be made easier, or my life will be made less focused on stuff in general, if I can just make peace with the idea that minimalism maybe doesn't have to be a label that I identify with, or any kind of part of what I'm trying to do here. And again, this is another one of those videos that might be like, well, yeah, that's obvious. You don't have to be a minimalist. Nobody has to be a minimalist. Certainly many people are minimalists and don't call themselves minimalists. And there was a time in my life where I both called myself a minimalist and actually was one. And that was when I first moved back to the US from New Zealand with a couple of suitcases and my viola in a backpack. And that's all I had for a long time. Even the furniture that I had was packable into one car. It was just a futon mattress, like a floor mattress pad, and that was it. And so there was a time that I was a minimalist, both by choice, but mostly by lifestyle. And I went out of my way to not accumulate more stuff than I needed, but I also didn't have any money. And so there were multiple elements of that, and multiple kind of ways that the pendulum swung the other way when I started earning money from jobs and had more resources and more time and more kind of mental and emotional bandwidth to acquire nicer things or devote more time, I guess, to the curation of stuff, which was an element of the minimalism I was seeing modeled for me online. I guess also, to some degree, the buy and declutter cycle, which I talked about as well earlier, was something I saw modeled online as well, where not only the haul YouTubers or influencers were buying and decluttering, but also the minimalists were doing 30-day declutters, or also fewer nicer things and then letting go of the less nice things in order to have the most beautiful collection or the most curated collection. And so I think decluttering was more focused on than not buying, if that makes sense. And I know there are also people out there who call themselves minimalist-ish or eco-minimalists, and so there's definitely not a one-size-all label for minimalism, or a target number of stuff even, like there's no numerical answers or even lifestyle answers that are applicable to everybody. And I'll also be honest, something that I feel like has also been corrupted into an aesthetic, and also, there are people who are minimalists by label and by kind of societal perception who are not minimalist in every category. Like, I think there's a famous anecdote about how one of the minimalists has 9 jackets, and that's actually more jackets than I own as a non-minimalist. And so there are categories in every person's life that won't be minimalist. And I guess actually in some ways, the houses of the minimalists are more normal than some of the extreme minimalists out there online. And so the bar to aspire to, or the model of minimalism, is not something that's set in stone either. I guess going back to the decluttering point for a moment, I think the extent to which we've seen decluttering modeled and normalized online, whether it's, again, the large influencers doing quarterly declutters of their wardrobes, skincare and makeup, etc., whatever it is that they're hauling and reviewing, or the minimalists who are doing the 30-day minimalism game, or letting go of things slowly even, I think it has normalized decluttering as a part of the no-buy, conscious consumerism, minimalism at large journey. I think it's normalized this as a part of a lot of these endeavors to be more sustainable, to be more, I use this word with trepidation, but more healthy in a way, right? Having more simplicity, more mental clarity, less decision fatigue, all of these things that go along with having a simplified collection of stuff or less inventory to manage. And so it does feel like the declutter has been kind of elevated to this thing that we must do, or that we should periodically be doing, or that we should be evaluating on a regular basis, whether we need to be keeping our stuff. And I maybe have reached a moment in time where it's okay to take a break from that for now, or to just let it happen organically and not do kind of purposeful declutters every season. We'll see. I might be eating my words next season when I go through my winter declutters. Speaking of minimalism as a home aesthetic, it is something that I do feel like people in my house would be happy with, and then other people in my house are actively working to destroy in terms of my husband not being somebody who likes clutter, but then we also have small children who just kind of don't notice clutter and are constantly bringing it into the home. And so there is an element of the daily battle of trying to keep, again, not an aesthetic for the sake of being a minimalist, but a clutter-free aesthetic for the sake of the people who live here. And I mean, I have more tolerance for clutter than my husband does, but it's still something that I'm not actively seeking to let pile up unaddressed. And I would feel a little more at peace if I had my own kind of clutter permissible spaces in the house. But the way our house is laid out, it's not really possible to do that. We have a large house, but it's not that large that we can all have our own kind of extra rooms and things like that. So it is something I'm trying to keep in mind in terms of maybe not having a minimalist aesthetic, but having a clutter managed aesthetic, if that makes sense. And it does actually take daily work and daily effort in order to not have this take over our living spaces. I guess as I speak right now, I'm noticing all the clutter on the top of our bed frame. Mostly mine, of course. And I guess in reality, it wouldn't take a lot of time to address this. I could take a few minutes after this video and just sweep these things off of the bed frame and find another place for them. But in reality, if something doesn't have an established home in your house, then it's going to take a little bit of effort to find where it should go and designate that to be the place that it goes, and then make sure it always gets put back there. And so maybe it's not even just the minimalism part of this that's a struggle for me. It's just managing the clutter in my home, keeping a clean and tidy area that is a challenge for me as well. And maybe something that I either need to find better systems to manage or make a little bit more peace with in order to have a less conflicted existence. And maybe, again, that's an overstatement in terms of the effect it has on my daily life. I'm not actually that stressed or worried about it, but there is an element of feeling like I should do something about it on a regular basis. And again, you've probably seen some B-roll of my cluttered house when I showed all the piles of books in the earlier video this month. I'm not going to be one of those professional influencers and use the same B-roll for every kind of related clip. I can't bring myself to do that. But I guess the final kind of thing that I've been pondering about this is that I do want to be a minimalist, just like I do want to do a no-buy. But various factors have made it difficult for me to do so. One of these big factors being continually placing myself in the way of influence, or in the way of consuming this kind of content and these kinds of messages about how buying things is okay or normal, or acquiring things to try out and having a kind of cycle of buying and decluttering is not that bad, or something normal people do, of picking up the random odds and ends at the Target store or wherever you are on Amazon, or, it's not been something that I've regularly done over these past few years, especially not over the time of this channel in terms of Target shopping or Amazon hauling or anything like that. But there is so much content out there that normalizes these things, and I do want to not be partaking in these things. I do want to be more minimalist, if not an actual minimalist. And maybe the core of this conflict that I feel about it is that the examples I see online are so often those day and night transformations. And again, I think I made a spoof video back in April, the April Fools, it's all gone, with an empty closet shot. And I do think that's what we see most of the time online, is people doing this day and night transformation, doing a massive declutter, or people who've already been through the process, which maybe this channel will be one of those in the future. I don't know. Maybe someday I'll be sitting here saying, there was a time when I had 170 pieces in my wardrobe and now I only have 20 or whatever. I mean, that's not going to happen, but maybe there will be a time, maybe as early as next year, who knows? Maybe I'll be looking back and saying, yeah, I wanted to be a minimalist and now I think I made it, or whatever. But I do think that the fact that we see so much of this day and night transformation online does make it feel like we should be doing that too. Or again, speaking for myself here, it has made me want to pursue that style of minimalism in terms of let's go through the house with a trash bag and donate all our stuff, or get ourselves down to that clean and tidy aesthetic through getting rid of stuff. And I mean, the not reaccumulation of this stuff, I think, is more important than actually going through and culling all the stuff you have. But that's maybe the less glamorous side of tackling the problem, right? You know, we're going through the house and not buying anything, you know, like that doesn't really give you much fodder for a viral video or a thumbnail where you're sitting in an empty room with nothing in the background, right? Because you didn't buy anything. Like that's not the narrative that I've seen the most, at least. Although that could be fun and interesting, right? Where it's like, here's my empty house because I haven't bought anything in the past 3 years or whatever. And I guess part of it as well is the associations that I have with minimalism being positive, being aspirational, being, you know, the people who are minimalists are people that I don't mind wanting to be like to some extent, although this does feel like it's decreased since I've removed myself from the landscape of influence. You know, I do see these people more as regular people rather than aspirational figures in my life. And I do think that's a massive step forward in the right direction in terms of how I interact with, I guess, parasocial figures or even kind of models of my own life goals. I guess part of it is not seeing myself as lesser than these people who are not only modeling a very aesthetic life, but are in many cases very successful with their online businesses, right? Content creation, they often have millions of followers. They're often kind of demonstrably popular in ways that I would never dream of becoming. And I guess so many of my kind of endeavors to become a certain kind of person, to become cool, to become stylish, to become well-read, to become more beautiful or anything like that, you know, all of these have resulted in entering a buying and later decluttering cycle, or a rotating kind of conveyor belt of stuff in and out of my life, whether it's been clothing, makeup, shoes, books, hobby equipment, you know, you name it. It's all been in pursuit of wanting to be a certain kind of person, while simultaneously also wanting to be more minimalist, which is kind of bizarre. And feels like it's almost at odds, you know, these pursuits are almost at odds with each other. I guess there are also kind of more pursuits that I have had increasing interest in over the course of this journey as well, like sustainability, like the climate crisis, you know, trying to be a part of managing that through more sustainable consumption habits. And, you know, all of this is kind of morally at odds with the cycles that I've stepped in and out of over these past few years as well. I guess another way to think of it is that I have been active in many areas of my life rather than dormant or extinct, you know, if we're talking volcano terms here, where I have cycles that go on. You know, in my wardrobe, there have been recent cycles of bringing new things in and sending old things out. I consider that active. In my makeup drawer, on my bathroom counter, there are cycles of products in and out. On my bed frame even, there are cycles of products that come and go. On the dresser, on the counter, you know, there are cycles of products that come and go, that are purchased and let go of. And I guess what I need to do is make these either dormant or extinct. And that's kind of what I'm working towards in terms of, especially my makeup collection. I think I've made great progress in this regard. And books, I think, again, I've made great progress in terms of these are both categories that I haven't purchased a lot in this year, even when I've slipped up. And clothing has been less successful. It's a more active category in my wardrobe and in my life. But part of that is due to having body fluctuations, having things no longer fit. And so it's a joint effort, I guess, in why these categories remain active versus going dormant or eventually becoming extinct in the categories that can become extinct. And perhaps that's realistically not a whole lot of categories, but I do think, for example, our homewares acquisition is mostly extinct in that we don't actually have the need for anything, or have the desire to rotate things or have decorative pieces or anything like that at this time. So, homewares are effectively an extinct category for us. Maybe makeup and books are a dormant category for me, where it's a time where I don't need to be active in cycling things in and out, especially after doing the makeup declutter recently, doing the evaluation of the 6 red lipsticks that just felt like too many, and now keeping 3, and doing a reevaluation of my book collection, my TBR, and not actually letting go of anything, but deciding what I'm going to tackle next. And hopefully my wardrobe can become dormant as well. That is the goal. But making the concerted effort to not buy stuff for the past 2 years of this challenge has made me see how difficult it can be, especially in America, where the attitude is often free stuff must be taken, cheap stuff is good, and more is more. These are common attitudes that surround me in this country. Other attitudes include that the solution to having too much stuff is a bigger space, or to put it in the garage, or to get a storage unit, or to have organizational solutions. And it all conspires to make it just really hard to just buy what we need and not a lot more. It makes it hard to break out of these cycles. It makes it hard to go from active to dormant to extinct in terms of our consumption levels. And again, when I say dormant, I think that also includes buying replacements only, right? So having the same setup on your bathroom counter and only replacing a skincare or hygiene product when it's run out or almost run out, so that the status quo is maintained. That's the kind of dormant that I would like to go for and actually maintain, at least for a year, as part of a way to make this a fun challenge, but ideally for life. So after all that, I do also want to add a note in this video, finally, to say that while I maybe am struggling with the concepts of minimalism in terms of applying them to my life, or in terms of having wanted to be a minimalist for so long and never actually achieving it, I am thankful for the minimalist creators out there, the people kind of making this aspirational content, even if it is unrealistic in some ways, or even if it does kind of plant seeds that are maybe a little misguided, at least for me in my own life, right? It was another kind of influence or exposure that made me think I had to do certain things in a certain way, which again is not on the content creators, it's on me and my reception of this content, at least in part. It's always a two-way street, right? Like, it's never just a one-sided thing, right? Like, I want to make that clear. However, I'm not blaming any of these content creators, and in fact, in a lot of ways, I am grateful for the ideas that they've shared that I've criticized, right? The fewer, nicer things, the less but better, the curated collections, the declutter all your house down to the stuff you need, the manage less inventory, the it's okay to let things go even if it's not sustainable, just get it out of your house for peace of mind, for simplicity, for less things talking to you in terms of them telling you to wear them or making you feel guilty for having them or spending the money. Even these ideas that I am critical of, I still am grateful for being exposed to them in order to be able to be critical, to think for myself, to have a reaction now that I'm removing myself from being blindly influenced and responding to these things from my genuine life with my genuine needs, my genuine preferences, my genuine goals. So thank you to all the minimalism creators for putting these ideas out there in an aspirational, cool person kind of way, so that I can then take them in my non-aspirational, non-cool person real life. And now that I've finally learned how to consume content consciously, actually take what works for me and leave the rest, and not feel guilty about not successfully becoming a minimalist. All right, with that, I would love to hear your stories, your perceptions, your thoughts on minimalism. I think this was kind of sparked by receiving a comment on a video I did last year about the minimalist rules, where I basically talked about why they didn't work for me. And I guess this video is essentially doing the same thing, but without that framework, and perhaps with a little bit more maturity. The comment, incidentally, was saying that they think I've misunderstood the rules of the minimalist and that I don't know what I'm talking about. And yeah, I mean, that's probably true. I'm admitting it here. You heard it here first or last. I don't understand minimalism. I'm not a minimalist, and that's okay. All right, with that, I will stop talking and say bye for now and see you in the next one.